Starting a business, no matter what kind of business it is, it's not easy. And we have great days and we have challenging days. But if we're just putting our heads down, trying to take advantage of the opportunities that we have, do it in a way that reflects our values, that's the most that I think we can ask of ourselves. And you just have to have this belief. I have this very deep, crazy belief that things will work out in a way that they're supposed to work out. And again, I can't prove it, but that well of belief is critical.
You're listening to the Faith and Work podcast, where we explore ways to serve God and others in our daily work to bring life and hope to workplaces and cities.
Welcome to the Faith and Work podcast. I'm Ross Chapman, your host for today, and I serve as the CEO at Denver Institute for Faith and Work. We are continuing a series we launched in 2025 called Voices from the Workplace. And this week we're talking about entrepreneurs and a venture studio, in fact, that works with entrepreneurs and also has to raise money from their own investors. So they're kind of VC/entrepreneurs, an incredible group. And the two founders we're speaking with today, I'm very excited for you to learn from. Just a reminder, the Voices from the Workplace series is all about highlighting people who are living as faithful workers so that we can learn their story and about their experience and apply that into our own work. And if you're not an entrepreneur, if you're not an investor, that's totally okay, because the things that they're going to talk about are things that you can apply in your everyday work. And that is why we're doing this series. We want to take you inside different industries, and this one is going to be very exciting. So let me tell you quickly about our guests, David Wagner and Jesse Marble. David is the founder and managing partner at Wildwood Ventures, which is an early stage VC venture capital that's focused on human health and well-being through technology. Before launching Wildwood, David had 17 years at VF Corporation, which is a huge name in consumer brands. Most importantly, the one I know is that they own the North Face, but Timberland and Vans. And David has 17 years there and 6 years as an executive leader, leading global strategy, 6 years doing all of that. He's lived in Colorado, North Carolina, Switzerland, and he has experience in private equity and consulting. And he's got degrees from UNC Chapel Hill. If you're out there in North Carolina, you're going to love that. And he has a degree from Harvard, and now he lives in Denver. Married to Jennifer, and they have 4 kids. And then Jesse Marble is the founder and partner at Wildwood Ventures. He focuses on growth, founder sourcing, advising, investor relations. And before Wildwood, Jesse was the CEO of Magneti, which was an award-winning growth marketing firm, which he helped scale and also helped exit. He's a career entrepreneur. He's got lots of experience in healthcare startups, failures, wins, everything along the way. And he is living in the Denver area as well and married to Kate, and they also have 4 kids. David Wagner and Jesse Marble, welcome to the Faith and Work podcast. I have to say, I am so happy to have you both on this podcast.
Thanks, Ross. We're excited to be here today.
Yeah, no, well, thank you for your time. Thank you for your excitement about the work of Denver Institute over many years and the way you've just been an advocate for our mission and actually living it out. And that's what we get to talk about today. So let's just jump right in a little bit and help our audience and our guests and our listeners know who you guys are and what your journey has looked like. So David, we'll start with you. Could you just kind of share a little bit with us about your work life up to this point? I know you have spent 17 years at VF Corp. You had many of them on the leadership team, executive team, and then you kind of left all that to do this Wildwood thing. But kind of tell us, what was that career like, that arc for you? Give us a little bit of that background, bring us up to today.
Yeah, thanks again, Ross, for having Jesse and me here to join you and just get to have this conversation. Yeah, so as you said, my professional background is really in the world of consumer brands. For audience members who may not know, VF is a large global owner of some of the biggest outdoor and active lifestyle brands in the world. So they own the North Face and Vans and Timberland and a lot of others that people may have in their closets. So I had a long journey there professionally, personally. It was a really important place to me for a long time. We have 4 children. All of them were born, while I was at VF. And as a family, we lived in North Carolina and we lived in Switzerland and back in North Carolina. And then we moved here to Denver in 2019, where we live today. That's when VF moved its headquarters here to Colorado. So in terms of how that relates to what I do today, if you had told me several years ago that I'd be living in Denver, Colorado, playing the role of a early stage venture capital investor, I would have thought you were crazy. It's a good little example of how life takes us in directions that we don't see at the time, but in hindsight, it's like, oh, that was amazing and that was perfect. So the way that I kind of moved into this role that I have now at Wildwood Ventures, working with Jesse, as I said, at VF, did a lot of things. And the last thing that I did there was start a little corporate ventures group. And that was really exciting for me. It was something that I really believed in for the company. And I was enjoying it a lot. The issue is that when COVID happened, VF went into what turned out to be a pretty deep turnaround. Most of that was attributable to the Vans business kind of stalling and going backwards. It's an interesting story, but it actually gave me the opportunity to start Wildwood. And, God was very much in that story of Wildwood. It was a tough time during the kind of the turnaround years that I was there at VF, doing restructurings and just getting caught up in stuff internally that wasn't all that productive. But this corporate venture thing was really exciting for me. And the door opened for us to basically move that activity from being an internal business unit of VF to being a freestanding company called Wildwood Ventures. And now VF is a very active partner to us as an investor in our fund. So that's kind of the professional story of what happened. But for me, there was also very much a personal piece, which some people know, some people don't. But going back to 2021, I had this moment in the early summer of 2021 where I felt God kind of calling me to go and work with entrepreneurs that are building businesses that matter for people and that are improving, human well-being. And when I got that calling, I didn't know what to do with that, Ross. I had never had an experience like that before, and it led me down this path of realizing that there's a lot of people out there that have figured out how to really live out their faith in their vocation. And I would say that for me, up until that point, I had had a bit of a dividing line or a curtain in between what I did at work and the things that I really held true as important in life. And it wasn't that they were at odds with each other necessarily, but they weren't integrated. And so I got connected with, the Denver Institute, and I got connected with Praxis in New York City, and I got connected with faith-driven entrepreneur and faith-driven investor. And I saw all these amazing examples of awesome business people that are really good at what they do, but they do it in a way that is clearly engaging their personal faith and motivated by that. And I was like, wow, I could do that too. And so Wildwood is, we are a for-profit venture capital investment firm. We are trying to drive great returns for our investors. But I really believe that you can do that by meeting human needs. And so our thesis around what we call healthy and active humanity, really around human health and well-being, if you meet human needs really well, people will pay you for that. And that can form the foundation of a great business. And so both can be true. And so it's been a really cool journey for me to, get to realize that I can do that. I would say, especially as an entrepreneur, you just have a lot more degrees of freedom to shape that into your daily routines.
David, thanks for sharing this story. And I do remember our first ever meeting, you were telling me about this moment where you felt like, I think God might be asking me to do something different. Well, I just appreciate you were willing to ask the question. You obviously took a big risk making a job change. And one of the things I would love to just help people reflect on is you didn't immediately think, I think that means God wants me to go do nonprofit and church work, which sometimes gets to be the frame and the imagination we have about what it means to join with God's work in the world. You were actually just looking for a way to better integrate what you were good at, what you loved doing, where you saw opportunity, and trying to meet needs that would bring greater flourishing to. And I thought that was just a really important thing to say, because I talk to a lot of people that just immediately think, oh, I need to leave my professional job to go work inside something that feels more aligned with my faith. And I just appreciate you taking the risk and saying, let's go build something new together. So we'll get back to some more questions about that journey, I'm sure. But Jesse, let's bring your story up to speed with the audience as well. You've kind of had the chance to do everything, sort of, as an entrepreneur. You've had some wins, some losses, some risks, some different roles. You've been in a lot of different positions. I'd love for the people just to hear what your journey has been, and then we can dive into some more questions. And then maybe you can connect the dots on how you and David got connected and decided we're going to do this thing together.
Yeah, so I worked for some venture-backed SaaS companies out of college, primarily in sales and marketing, built a marketing company that I sold a few years ago. As you're alluding to, I also had this headset. Is a health tech startup. It was a headset to help predict seizures, and it did not work. We won a startup competition, won some grant money, tried it, and ultimately ran into some issues with the FDA and HIPAA and whatnot. So that was a really fun journey too, but it did not work. I've had many failed ideas. But one of the kind of meta context for me, so my dad was a pastor for 25 years, and we're similar in personality in a lot of ways. And people would say all the time, when are you going to go into the ministry? As if that's this like kind of grand destination for everybody's career. And there was something that just, that's not where I felt called. And there's even just this basic math that, my dad has sort of 90 minutes with people every week on Sunday. And that running a company, engaging with team and customers and stakeholders and investors, there's just orders of magnitude more time and surface area that we get in our daily life, in our work life. And that's where I felt called, was how can I follow Jesus in a skill set and area that is not, quote unquote, just the church and ministry. And so I've always felt this idea that you have to connect these things, our faith and our work. It's kind of strange that feels like a new idea or something, maybe, that there's like, but in fact, I love this quote. I pulled it up. It's the quote from Abraham Kuyper, which people quote all the time. There's not a square inch in the whole domain of our human existence over which Christ, who's sovereign over all, does not cry, mine. And that is our moments, our days, our hours of life, whether that's work or, yes, in worship with our families, in how we are vacationing, that we surrender that to the Lord. And so I had a whole journey of selling my last company. And to tie that in with the story with David, we had met through Jeff Haanen, former head of Denver Institute for Faith and Work. And there was an opportunity after I had sold my last company. David was at VF. He was running this corporate venture group. We were having coffee one day, actually, here in the South Denver metro area. And he said, hey, you're a free agent at the moment, and I'm running this corporate venture group. What if we spin out this group? And I looked at him with probably very intense eyes and said, yes, of course, we should do that. This sounds like a great idea. To David's credit, he literally went to the CEO the next business day, and the CEO said yes on the spot. So the way that God opened the doors, there are so many details around that, but the way that the Lord opened the door for Wildwood to exist, David and I have from the beginning known that this is a God thing and that we needed to step through the doors that he continues to open for us. So lots of amazing details there. There's a story from Exodus chapter 12 of when the Israelites are leaving Egypt that we talk about a lot internally. And we love what we get to do, and we know that God has called us to it.
I love that story. That's so fun. To both of you, I'd love to hear a little more. David, you kind of talked about this, but the risk and what that felt like to go in and say, hey, I want to go do this thing and see what your boss says about it, the CEO of VF. But also, you had already decided, this is a risk I want to take, and I want to know what was behind that a little bit. Maybe God was behind it. Maybe there were some other things. What did it feel like? Help us understand what that felt like. And then Jesse, you said you were a free agent. What compelled you to say, this is what I want to spend the next chapter of my work life doing, helping these entrepreneurs with this purpose? What was really behind those things? And David, you could start.
Well, whenever you start a business, which is what Jesse and I have done, there is some trepidation around that for lots of reasons. There's, the financial concern. Oh my gosh, how am I going to make enough money? Is this thing going to work? Am I going to be a failure? Like, those are normal questions that entrepreneurs have. And I certainly had those. But fortunately for me, the decision, if you will, at the time, it really didn't feel that hard. And I think the reason that it didn't feel that hard was that personally, for the probably year and a half before that moment where I had this kind of very specific calling, it was at a family camp in the mountains of Colorado, I had been growing a lot in my faith. And I had been learning from other people and seeing examples from other people. And I increasingly came to believe that, like, everything that I had done in my life to that point was preparing me to do this. And why not me? Why not me? And in many ways, VF, and again, we're so thankful for their partnership and give them so much credit. They had every reason not to do it, not to seed our first fund, and that effectively seeded us as a firm, but they did. And, we're grateful to their leaders that did that. But I also think, you know what? God somehow had a hand in that, and I can't prove it. And I don't know exactly how it worked, but he just kept opening doors. And when you see doors continue to be open when really they shouldn't be open, that's kind of the sign. And Ross, you and I have talked before about this notion of like faithfulness and just trying to do what seems right and trying to honor the Lord in that. And that's what Jesse and I tried to do. And, starting a business, no matter what kind of business it is, it's not easy. And we have great days and we have challenging days. But if we're just putting our heads down, trying to take advantage of the opportunities that we have, do it in a way that reflects our values, that's the most that I think we can ask of ourselves. And you just have to have this belief. I have this like very deep, crazy belief that things will work out in a way that they're supposed to work out. And again, I can't prove it, but that well of belief is critical. Like, I don't know how we would have done this otherwise, candidly.
Well, I think there's a lot to say in scripture about that perspective and attitude. And I love the faithfulness, fruitfulness conversation, and sometimes the fruit doesn't look the way we might expect. It might not look like a bunch of successful companies coming out of a venture studio. Maybe it does. But if faithfulness is related to our abiding in Christ and doing right by others and doing right by God and the things he's given us to do, I think it will produce fruit. It'll produce the kind of fruit that he wanted to see happen, whether it's in us or in the world or in the companies we're working in or wherever that is. Mm-hmm. So I love that deep belief. And I think that does enable people who are deeply rooted in their faith to take big risks, take a step that seems maybe a little crazy. Of course, entrepreneurs are doing that all the time. Jesse, how'd that feel for you? You've experienced big wins. You've experienced failures, as you noted. And when David was like, hey, why don't we do this? What really was behind it for you? Like, what made you say yes immediately?
Yeah, there was my background in marketing and working in an agency on a lot of things at one time is a natural fit for the venture capital way, which is kind of a portfolio view of life and work. And so I had a natural draw to the notion of venture capital and the kind of go big or go home nature. Your venture capital is on the edge of watching and investing in what the future looks like. And that's always been a draw for me. But I just think that David and I, when we first started to get to know each other, also saw how complementary we are in our own skill set. And that David is a genius and he is the smartest person in every room that he's in, and he's never going to allude to that. And I have a set of experience and skill sets that works well with that. And what I saw right away was a complementary nature of our skill set, an opportunity in venture capital, and around this thesis of healthy and active humanity. What you see in venture capital, everybody is going to invest in what is the next AI frontier model. How can we invest in OpenAI and Anthropic and All of that is great. And all of that technology is very real. But what aligned David and I was a belief around the human condition, which is that as more people invest in this AI forward world, what is the human experience around that? What does it mean to live life to the full for the humans in the loop? And you hear about agentic software, you hear about platforms where literally agents can talk to each other and transact with each other. We continue to say, what does it mean to be human? And so there was a complement of our skill set, shared core beliefs, values. Yes, we both happen to be persons of faith, but that is not actually, we're not a quote unquote religious firm. We're not a Christian firm. And what we mean by that is we don't only invest in founders that are faith aligned with David and I, or our team does not have to be aligned with us and our personal faith convictions. But we think that those faith convictions flow into a belief around the world, around this thesis of what does technology mean for the human experience that is compelling and broad and urgent for the world. So I was really compelled by how David and I could work together. I was compelled by venture capital as an asset class and opportunity. I was compelled by the thesis area that we could move into. And it has been such a blessing to build Wildwood. We actually just had our 3-year anniversary of launching Wildwood. We launched in the spring of 23. And the way that we've grown and learned, the way the team has shifted a little bit, the way that, man, David and I just every day are learning something new about what it means to work in venture capital. And that journey for me is really compelling. I love the frontier edge of ideas and thinking, and venture capital gets to do that every day.
Hi, I'm Mike Sandgren.
And I'm Catherine Sandgren, and we're donors to Denver Institute for Faith and Work. The Faith and Work podcast has shaped the way I think about my work as a marketing professional, especially in the day-to-day diligence of creating good work.
As Denver Institute pursues its mission to prepare people to serve God and others through their daily work, we believe that vision is worth investing in. Workplaces and cities don't just change on their own. It takes people in every industry, faithfully stewarding the positions that God has placed them in, seeing their work as a way to love their neighbors and bring hope and life to their city. Denver Institute can only do that work with the support of listeners like you.
If the Faith and Work podcast has encouraged you, or if a Denver Institute event or publication has shaped the way you think about your work, we'd love for you to join us in supporting this mission. To learn more or make a gift, please visit the Give page at denverinstitute.org.
Well, thanks for giving more insight into why you guys kind of aligned. Obviously, a shared faith, but really a belief in what's best for humanity. I think that is rooted in your shared belief. And if you have a vision of what is a good human being, what is life to the full, which we're going to get to in a second. If you have a shared vision for that and a shared kind of assessment of where there might be places in society where that's at risk, for like, what does it mean to have a good human life? What can we do about it through business? We run a annual business event. You guys are there all the time, but we say that business drives human flourishing like nothing else can. It's really similar to kind of what you're talking about there, I think, Jesse, and what you guys are about. Okay, I want to go to David, who Jesse just described as a genius. I know David hated that, but I do want to ask for David's insights for just the person out there that's like, what is a venture studio? What does that even mean? Like Jesse's saying you're like in VC and we're saying you're like entrepreneurs. Like it seems like you guys are in the middle somehow. Like you're both entrepreneurs and investors and you're working with investors and you're working with entrepreneurs. So like, David, help us understand, what is a venture studio? What are you guys actually doing? What is the work?
Yeah, so I would describe our business model within the context of us being early stage investors as operating what we call it a growth studio. So we write checks into the balance sheets of early stage startups, just like every other venture capital investor does, but we do a lot more than that as well. So we come alongside our founders at the earliest stages of venture creation. So in the industry speak, that would be at the pre-seed stage. And we deploy alongside of them a super talented team that works with Jesse and me every day, Amy and Nick and DK and Jess and Rita. And they partner with our founders in those earliest, very difficult days of building a business, getting your product to market, getting to initial indications of product market fit, et cetera. And so we tend to work with our founders for about a year, literally rolling up our sleeves and partnering with them every day. So we are way more involved than a typical venture capital investor is. Typically a VC, once you do the deal, you'll have occasional calls with your founders and you'll try to introduce them to people that are helpful for what they need to accomplish. But we are really in the weeds of building a product and figuring out how to sell that product. And we are very active, Jesse in particular, helping them to complete the fundraising that they need to do. And we really help them with building out their team and their own personal and leadership development. So that's the model that we chose to employ. It really kind of was a natural continuation of what we were doing inside of VF. And it's a non-traditional model. It's got a lot of pros to it. It has some extra challenges as well. Any business model does. But it's one that we felt called to, and we really wanted to bring that to life in the early days of Wildwood.
That's awesome. I love it. It's like builders and investors. And if you're an entrepreneur, you got a team of people you can come rely on and check their expertise, and you guys can help them so much. And then on the investor side, you've got an active kind of team that's really caring for the investment. It sounds like. So I think it's cool. Sounds really fun. You guys obviously have found a thing that you love to do together. Let's talk just a little more about your tagline's life to the full. Maybe that's all I want to say. Just walk me through why the tagline is life to the full and what's behind that.
Well, it does refer to the book of John, chapter 10, verse 10. But we also thought it was an amazing encapsulation of what we believe from a thesis and investment perspective, is that lots of investors and entrepreneurs are thinking about the tech. And yes, while we invest in tech companies, we want to be focused on the ones that fundamentally solve human needs and promote human flourishing, human thriving, the human experience. And so it was just a great way to say, what does it mean to be human in a world dominated by AI? We're going to focus on that human half of the equation. Now, again, we're investing in tech companies, and all these tech companies are using AI. I mean, I think our startups, our founders are awesome users of AI. The constraints of an early stage startup, the resource constraints of being a thinly funded startup, which is so normal in the startup space, it forces resourcefulness, and AI is just an amazing. I think that most startup founders are usually on the bleeding edge of using AI because they have to. You have to find a way to get stuff done without a bunch of bodies. So we're fans of AI. We are not Luddites in any way, but we want to be investing in the kinds of companies that bring life to the full. So for our thesis, that's across physical health and mental health. And when people think about VF and the North Face, you think about things like outdoors and adventure. That's certainly something we look at in our thesis as well. But life to the full, while yes, it has this kind of scripture reference, it has been this tagline and this rallying cry that even people that don't align with David and I on faith specifically, they read that and they go, yes, I get it. There is a big interconnected view of what it means to be human. It's your physical health and your mental health and your relationships, right? Research says that the number one driver of longevity is the health and volume of your social connections and relationships as you get older. It's one of the top 3 drivers of longevity is your social life. And so we wanted to take this kind of health and wellness idea and just zoom out a little bit and say it's much more than do you hike and bike or run or do yoga. There are a bunch of factors, and we thought life to the full was just a really cool way to articulate a broad, holistic, with this really cool nod to David and I's personal faith convictions in the Christian faith. So there's my 2 cents. David, I would love to hear your version of that too.
Yeah, I'd like to connect this to technology and to the founders that we back. So Ross, we live in the wealthiest society in human history. We've got amazing power at our fingertips. We used to have the world's information at our fingertips. Now we have the world's logic and computational ability at our fingertips with AI. And we're supposedly more connected than ever before, back to Jesse's point about relationships. But all those things are true, and yet we are so unwell as a society. You can look at almost any dimension, physically, mentally, socially, spiritually, anything that you can quantify and anything where you can see trend lines, and American culture and society today is not doing well. And technology is not the root cause of that, but it's a major contributor. So when we talk about our thesis, the boogeymen, if you will, in our thesis would be things like the social media algorithm or processed foods. But I say all the time, technology is neutral. And if you point technology 15 degrees to the left or 15 degrees to the right with a certain intent behind it, you will get very different outcomes for people. And so back to this life to the full concept, the founders that we back, every single one of them are very mission driven. They want to build a big business, but they have this deep personal passion to solve a very specific problem out there. So we've got founders that are trying to, break the problems of kid screen time addiction or improve access to holistic care during birth and, maternal periods. We have founders that are trying to help reduce late stage cancer diagnosis. We have founders that are doing amazing things. And to Jesse's point, they may not all share our exact worldview, which is totally fine, but they are on mission with us and the kinds of outcomes that we're trying to drive for humans in the United States and one day beyond that when these companies really scale.
I just love hearing you guys talk about it. You're addressing brokenness in the world and in people. You're addressing disconnection, addiction, burnout, health issues, social issues. Martin Luther says, God doesn't need your good works, but your neighbor does. And you guys have kind of taken that and said, we can serve our neighbors through the kinds of businesses we help grow and invest our time, our resources in. As you guys have thought about, two questions before we wrap up. One is more related to how do you conceive of your neighbors? You've kind of said the end customers are the neighbors that you want to serve through the businesses, but your neighbors are also the founders that you're working with, the investors that you're working with. Do you have other, who are the neighbors, and how do you see yourselves kind of saying our job is to love them in a way through our work?
Yeah, Ross, you gave multiple examples of people that we work with every day who are our neighbors. So we have a responsibility to try to serve each of them in the right ways. If I had to pick, and Jesse and I talk about this from time to time, if I had to pick the neighbor, if you will, that is most our focus, it's actually our founders. And your typical VC investor, private equity investor will say, oh, of course, it's my own investors, people that are investing into my fund, and I owe them a return. And that is true for us as well. But if we don't serve our founders well, we're not doing a good job for our own investors. And it kind of ties back to this growth studio model that we talked about earlier, where we have this amazing opportunity to rub shoulders with our founders in ways that most investors never do, and really get to know them, understand not only their business, but what's going on in their lives and what's bringing them down, and giving them a hug and encouraging them. And I think we just have this awesome opportunity to do that. It's related to our business model, and it's related to the thesis that we invest in. But by serving them well, it's kind of like the classic, business school case, Southwest Airlines. You focus on your customer, and by focusing on your customer, you serve your investor. And that's very much the way that we think about it.
That's awesome. Yeah, well, I think you're obviously very intentional about that. You're resourcing them super well. You're caring for them on a personal level. Jesse, take us into how the last 3 years doing Wildwood together has shaped you towards being more like Jesus or growing in your faith or your own spiritual formation, however language you would use for that, you know?
There's an interesting journey for me personally from my last experience of running a company, where when you're running one thing, you can be really focused on, how do I wake up today and just make sure this one thing grows and thrives? I'm not going to let this one thing die. And it's just in some ways more simple, not easy in any form, but it's just, you have probably a smaller set of priorities in some ways. Venture capital and running a portfolio is a very different game, because some days all the headlines are green. We've got portfolio companies that are doing X, Y, and Z so well, and it's so exciting, and oh my gosh, we must be amazing at this. And the next day, the next hour, and I'm not exaggerating, sometimes it feels like the hour later, all the headlines have turned red and we have no idea what we're doing, and all these are going to fail. What I've learned, and this is hard to internalize, is yes, we show up and we do our part. Father, give us this day our daily bread, just for today. How can we show up and lead and love our neighbors well? And our neighbors are all these different stakeholders of investors and founders and our team and partners and other VCs we're investing in, all kinds of stakeholder groups. But ultimately, all we can do is show up and follow God's calling for today. And so I think what's been really shaping for me is venture capital. You are so less in control than you think. And the best venture capital investors in the world, you make a bunch of investments and you really have no idea which ones are going to work or not. And most career VCs will say they're always wrong. Within their portfolio, they'll say, oh, I think these were the ones that were going to take off, and these ones were like edge bets. And so many times they have them backwards. And the things that they thought were shoo-ins failed. And so just the sense of control and what do we know and what do we not know is always in question. It's very humbling. It's constantly humbling for me personally. And I mean, so many learnings specifically around trying to be a good investor and the mechanics and running deals and diligencing deals. And I mean, David and I could do a whole show on the things that we used to pay attention to that we don't anymore, things that we didn't pay attention to that we do now that we think are deal breakers for investments for us. That could be its own whole hour, how the criteria has shifted over time and how AI as a central tool of building companies has shifted what we look for in companies as well over the last 3 years. But I would just say, I think in so many ways, I'm a very different person from 3 years ago, from the learning, from the humility that's required, even the fundraising journey of Fund One, all the highs and lows, all the things we learned as our own entrepreneurial journey in that. So there is always a place in our lives around the crucible of challenge, the crucible. And entrepreneurship and leadership is just like one of the hottest crucibles of doing that. And so, yeah, I think David and I, it'd be fun sometime to just sit down and even talk about all the different things we've learned, how we've changed, how we've grown. I think my personality has shifted in little ways. I think everybody does over time, but I can point to some specific ones around that. So yes, the shaping and growing of us personally, I have lots of stories around that. But the idea of what we know, what we don't know, what we control, what we can't control. And that in venture capital, the egos are big in venture capital. And when you see SpaceX going public and you hear about these people that just made $100 billion, of course they're going to pretend that they knew that this was going to work. But when you rewind and you go back to pre-seed and seed, some of the smartest venture investors in the world said no to that because they thought there's no way it would work. And so hindsight is always 20/20. And so now we're in the opposite. We're early in this journey and we don't know what is really going to hit, but work hard in our diligence. We work hard in how we support our founders. And then ultimately, it's kind of up to God for the returns after that. But we do our part and give us this day our daily bread.
Both of you, thanks so much for sharing. And, just to remind you, it's a good reminder that our everyday work is our primary arena for our own discipleship and our own growth. It's also the primary arena where we can participate with what God's doing in the world. Mostly we mean our paid work, but it's not just paid work. It's unpaid work that we're going to do, whether we're raising kids or we're retired or whatever that is. That is our primary arena, where God has placed us. And so thanks for being faithful with the work in front of you guys, and just doing it with competence and excellence and with a little bit of fun in there. I'm confident as well. And just a joy to talk to you guys. Before we go, Jesse, before I let you go, I want you to tell them about your podcast. You're like starting a podcast.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Ross. I appreciate
that.
You got it. Yeah, we just 3 episodes out so far. It's called The Long View, and it's really focused on builders and doers, very hands-on. What does it mean to be in the trenches? When we talk about the humbling journey. So yes, it's startup people and investors, but it's also athletes. There's some corporate leaders on there too. It's that old saying, I'm going to butcher it, but what is the quote? It's like, a plan is there until you're punched in the mouth. It was like, I don't know.
Everybody's got a plan until you're punched in the mouth.
Is that a Mike Tyson or something quote? Mm-hmm. And so it's intended to just be the guards down, transparent stories of getting your butt kicked. I'm actually recording one this afternoon. A man named Joey Cheek. He was a Olympic speed skater. He won gold, silver, and bronze, then went on to work on startups. And so the journey of like, what does it mean to literally be the best in the world, literally, objectively, at this one very niche thing, long track speed skating, to then building startups. I'm really excited for that conversation. So The Long View, thank you, Ross, for letting me give a shout out. It is available on anywhere you listen to podcasts, as well as on YouTube.
Fantastic, Jesse. I'm excited to check it out, man. It actually reminds me of the Eugene Peterson quote about a long obedience in the same direction for the kind of the with God life. So, really excited for you guys. Thanks for the work you're doing. Thanks for joining the Faith and Work podcast today.
Thanks, Ross.
Thanks for having us.
You will.
Well, thanks to David and Jesse for being on the podcast today. I'm always encouraged by the way that they're trying to live out their faith in their everyday work. I hope that you were as well. A takeaway might be just to ponder and think about how your everyday work can help the people around you, your neighbors at work, experience a life to the full a little bit more today. What would that look like for your customers, your coworkers, your employees, your investors, your stakeholders, to really have the opportunity to experience life to the full a little bit more because of the work that you do? And also, Jesse ended our conversation with a great reflection. How is the work shaping you? Are you imagining your work as a place of formation? How is God using it to shape you to be more like Him? So you can learn more about Wildwood at wildwood.vc. We'd love for you to do that. Spread the word to people who you think might want to know about it. And then I also want to point out, we've got a couple podcasts in our history that I think really tie into this conversation well. The first one that came to mind was one of our more popular episodes, which just simply explores what is life to the full as it relates to Harvard's definition of flourishing, and also what Scripture says about the New Jerusalem in Isaiah 65 specifically, which is something our staff has been reflecting on over the last month together, which is really fun. But I really encourage you to check that podcast episode out. And then we've got 2 podcast episodes that released more recently that were talks from our most recent Business for the Common Good, where we focused on the idea of making mercy more common in commerce. And I'd love for you to just check those podcasts out. Great talks from those speakers, and aligns with this vision of how does business drive human flourishing like nothing else can. We're grateful for David and Jesse creating a new thing, taking a risk, taking that step of faith, trying to do whatever they can to align who they are with what they do, and doing it in a winsome way where people of faith want to join, and people who are not really saying, I want to follow Jesus, but I love the vision that you have. They're being compelled by that. What an awesome vision. Thanks for listening to the Faith and Work podcast. May God bless you in your work.
If you've enjoyed this episode of the Faith and Work podcast, please subscribe, leave a review, or share it with a friend. The Faith and Work podcast is produced by Denver Institute. We believe that when Christians work faithfully, the world will taste the hope and life that Jesus provides. To learn more or to make a financial contribution, visit denverinstitute.org.